Before we get into this episode, I've decided to make a little disclaimer for anyone who might be listening, just to avoid any possible misunderstandings or clear up any potential confusion. For anyone who hasn't heard my podcast before, I have what is known as dyspraxia, which is a neurological condition that affects the brain. And while it affects a number of things, one aspect is speech and thought processing. Normally, with previous interviews, I do a significant portion of preparation prior so that I can maintain a certain focus and stay on a direction or current that I can stick to. But with this episode, I was requested to be the interviewee, and as other people would be manning the helm, I just basically showed up and answered the questions as honestly and naturally as I could. And so with that, you may notice that my responses seem a bit unfocused and garbled and a bit inconsistent. The reason for that being some of the areas in which dyspraxia affects the way I communicate. When I am simply speaking as myself, unfiltered and basically improvising, it is difficult for me to keep my train of thought on track. And when I try to make a point or explain what I mean about a certain topic, I often get lost in my own mind and my own vocabulary, and I have difficulty in keeping things straight and organized, both because my thoughts are often jumbled and basically a stew of chowder, and I don't necessarily have instant access to my banks of expression. Despite having the cognitive ability to retain a number of words and ideas, unlike a lot of people, the right words and proper expressions, they often don't come out immediately in the moment, and in the end, my brain will mix things up so that it's not the most coherent convention. At the same time, I've always struggled with a bad stammer ever since I was a kid, which, while it has improved over the years, and I don't quite get as stuck on pronunciation as I used to, I still struggle with it quite a bit because of the lack of fluidity in my brain and the disconnect between my mind and speech organs, trying to both speak and think at the same time in a way that flows smoothly, and also conveying all meaning in a tangible way. It's always difficult for me. This is why it was always easier for me to read from a script, and when I speak, just as a stream of consciousness, my mind will blank and I will struggle with properly communicating whatever it is that I'm trying to convey. And so I end up fumbling and sounding rather unintelligent. It's like trying to get through a door, but each time you move towards it, a lot of smaller doors pop up in your view. And though you have a skeleton key to get past all of them, the doors become a significant hurdle in getting to where you need to go. So while I try my best to make myself clear, it doesn't always come off that way because of these setbacks. This was especially true during my answer about feminism and equality. I basically sounded like a valley dude, or a Californian, with no real understanding of anything. Incidentally, my views are based on a considerable amount of research and willingness to look at both sides of issues, with a desire of understanding each point of view before I reach a concrete conclusion. But it's my struggle to communicate that prevents me from speaking in an elegant manner, and I realize that this is probably because of this, that people tend to misinterpret my statements and think that I'm simply ignorant, unintelligent, misinformed, and at times they take things the wrong way. I don't ever intend to offend, or I sound like anything I say comes from a hateful place. Even though I have a lot of criticisms about feminism as a movement and other groups in particular, I have nothing but respect for women and people in general, as I take every person as they are, and my view of who they are is only influenced by their character and their actions, not what sex or gender they happen to identify as, or what they happen to seem on the outside. I'm just not always the best at explaining what I mean. If you want me to prove it, just ask me for directions. A lot of dyspraxics would know exactly where I'm coming from, and that is what makes it all the more sadder to know that a lot of them have chosen to ostracize me because of their own misinterpretations of my statements. This is why I hate listening to myself talk, and while I almost never listen back at anything I've done, because to me I just sound like a blithering, rambling dunce. It's also another reason I chose to write a book about my experiences, because just simply talking about them could never capture the essence of my story, as writing about it would. So I wanted to let you know up front that when you hear my interview today, I probably won't sound like the smartest tool in the woodwork factory, but it's all a result of a neurological disorder that affects my speech and thought processing, and I hope it doesn't prevent you from having a positive listening experience. So without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Hello there, and thank you for tuning into the Theatric Dyspraxic podcast. Today's episode will be different from others in that I, Joan, and my colleague Liam Gall have been assigned to interview the Theatric Dyspraxic. The Theatric Dyspraxic is a highly ambitious and decorated entertainer in nearly every category of media, from acting to writing to masterminding blogs, YouTube channels, and authoring a highly anticipated book. There really isn't anything the Theatric Dyspraxic cannot do that doesn't garnish anything but praise, glory, and attention. He is known for spreading awareness about dyspraxia, attempting to draw attention to this otherwise unknown and underdiagnosed disorder. His outspoken efforts, opinions, and views on equality and egalitarianism, though very controversial and contested, is widely regarded simply as his most passionate and accomplished work to date. So without further ado, please welcome my colleague Liam Gall and the Theatric Dyspraxic.
Hi, it's an honor to be here and an honor to interview the Theatric Dyspraxic today.
And thank you for having me on. I'm usually used to being on the other side of this, so it's interesting to me to be able to be asked the questions instead of asking the questions. So I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So my first question today is regarding your autobiography. So I'm curious, given your age, being in your mid-20s, what inspired you to write the autobiography, and what would you look to gain from that?
So I started writing the book about 2 years ago, but I've always been interested in memoirs. I've always liked reading autobiographies of other people, and I just remember even being like 18, thinking about what I would say like years down the line, as if, maybe in my 50s or something, if I was to write a memoir or so. And it sounds narcissistic, which I completely understand. I can understand why people may not really get why I would want to do this, considering I'm not really a notable personality. I'm not notable. I'm not known for anything. I haven't reached any degree of fame. Excuse me if I just burped. But I have had certain experiences in my life that I felt could be captured in a literary way. It's hard to explain without actually reading it, but being a person with dyspraxia, I've experienced certain things, and I've gone through certain things that a lot of people with dyspraxia have experienced, while also having gone through things that are more or less unique to me. So taking all that into account, when I thought about some of the things that I experienced, uh, I felt like it was something that could be entertaining and have some value to people who might read it, particularly people who are interested in learning about dyspraxia, but also people who are interested in hearing stories about, theater and writing, and getting to know a little bit about my history and the things that I've experienced. So what I look to gain from that, uh, a little recognition would be nice, maybe a little bit of money, but for the most part, I would like just to be able to entertain people with a good book, and maybe make them laugh, and maybe make them, feel something, and just to have something that would resonate with other people, and maybe certain parts of it someone could read and think that's, I understand where he's coming from, and I feel a connection to that, like I have with autobiographies. I think everyone has a story that people could connect to, and mine just happens to be a little bit different from most people, which can be interesting. So I just hope that people can read it once it's finished and enjoy it.
Thank you for that. Now, most people write autobiographies towards the later part of their life, after a life full of accomplishments. As you are in your mid to late 20s, is this going to be a multiple series biography, or is this just going to be documenting the first quarter of your life?
That's a very interesting question, and I think I'm not so sure about that. I have chronicled more recent eras of my life through my blog and through videos that I've made on my channel. So I have talked about things that because the thing is, I'm always going through something. There's always something going on, and with the blog, it's like I could write about things that relate to my experience with dyspraxia, sort of almost in real time. Um, so as far as writing like a follow-up book, we'll see how it goes when I turn 50 or so. If I have a really good reason to write a whole other book, or maybe stories that I've written for my blog or something being, compiled, that's always, maybe a possibility. With the first, and then again, I was a little bit hesitant to write the book that I was writing. I put it off for a while. I mean, I kind of wanted to write my story for a number of years, but I just kept thinking like, people, you don't write a book this young. You don't write a book when you're in your 20s. Um, but I just felt by this point, by the time I started writing it, which like you said, it was the first, it is kind of up to the first quarter of my life. Um, so it is sort of like everything I've experienced up to that point, and I realized that that in itself was enough to kind of chronicle a saga, so to speak. So as far as writing anything following that, I'm not sure at this point, but I am happy with the progress that the current book is making.
Excellent. And I'm curious about kind of the overall tone of the autobiography. Will it be uplifting for those who do have dyspraxia? Does it have a more negative tone? I'm sure it's a very honest book, but how would you describe the tone? And then also, would you qualify it as a self-help book as well?
I would not classify it as a self-help book. I just don't really feel like I'm the person who should be, giving people like advice. It's more about, you interpret it the way that you want. It's really just like a chronicle, uh, I would say. And as far as the tone of it, I think it shifts throughout the book. I think there are parts that are, and I think it's more indicative of sort of the way I look at things, because it is kind of like alternating depending on the situation. There's a lot of, I mean, it is very revealing and it is very honest. And the things that I talk about, I don't shy away from anything. I don't shy away from my mental health battles. I don't shy away from the bullying, the self-hatred kind of stuff. There are some parts of the book that do get pretty heavy, but there are also some lighthearted moments. There's parts of the book that I'm hoping that people laugh at, hopefully not at my expense, but I hope that people can find it entertaining, whether it makes them sad or whether it makes them laugh. Um, so as far as that, and I don't plan to have any specific moral other than, just this is my life.
Can can you give us a sneak preview into the book? Can you describe possibly the most interesting or dramatic chapter of that book? And can you kind of explain Without giving too much away, can you kind of explain the details surrounding that situation?
Right. Without giving too much away. Well, there's several chapters that have some pretty some big moments in it. Um, there's one. So the book basically um, chronicles my experience with dyspraxia. And I didn't know that I had dyspraxia until later in my teen years and my late teen years. So it kind of goes through each year of my life, each, going through school and things like that, and sort of the confusion that I dealt with, and the confusion other people had. So there's one chapter in particular that I'm thinking of, around maybe 7 or 8, where I'm misdiagnosed with something that it turns out to be false, but it's something that has a big impact on where the story goes from there, and it's sort of shaped me for I guess better or worse depending on who you ask. And so there are some moments in that chapter where I go real in depth, um, and of course, just because I try to be as honest as possible, there are some moments that are shocking, I guess you could say. There are some, I haven't always engaged in the best behavior like anybody. I've engaged in some selfish behavior. So I made a few mistakes that might be a little bit jarring. Nothing too like outlandish. I haven't haven't killed a man or whatever, which I would never. I would admit if I did. No, but we got them, boys. No, but there are certain chapters that kind of stand out that I think they'll be a page turner. But the whole book itself, I wouldn't write it the way that it is if I didn't if I didn't think it would be interesting. I try to write something that like maybe someone like me would be interested in. So there's not really a wasted chapter that just goes into nothing, worthwhile. I think that there's enough in it that will capture the reader's attention throughout, with certain moments being like bigger than others.
I'd like to kind of segue from the autobiography into actually your name, the Theatric Dyspraxic. And could you please tell us the origin of your name, how you came to identify with that name, and what it means to you today?
The name, I was just trying to come up with a name that would stand out and maybe kind of capture the essence of who I am. And obviously being dyspraxic, that, I called myself that. But the theatric part is really, I have a long history with acting and being involved in theater, and there's a lot of that stuff in the book. And so I've been doing that for a while. So, and at the same time, the way that my personality can be, I can be a bit, dramatic. I can be a bit histrionic. I could be theatrical in a way. So it's almost like a double meaning. Like, he's theatric because he does theater, but he's also theatric because he's a theatrical person who can be very animated and dramatic, in good ways and bad, comedy and tragedy. But I just came up with the name while at work one day on lunch, and I was just walking around the store that I worked at, and just the name popped into my head, and it rhymed, or almost rhymed, and I thought that's kind of silly, that's a silly name, but I couldn't come up with anything better, so it became Theatric Dyspraxic, and it kind of stuck.
And speaking of names, can you explain to the new listeners or maybe people that aren't aware, how did you come up with the name Pondcast? That's kind of a play on words there. Can you explain why you decided to call it a Pondcast?
So that kind of came out of a little bit of spite, um, which I have discussed on my podcast before, and I'm sure we'll go into it, maybe a little bit. I don't know. Um, I don't talk about it too much because I've already kind of gotten in a little bit of trouble. But there are certain people in the dyspraxic community who, for whatever reason, have they've stirred up a lot of trouble. They've caused a lot of like divisiveness between dyspraxics. Um, So speaking about me personally, last year during the quarantine, we had little Zoom meetings in this group with several dyspraxics and a member of these of this sort of like little community. There's various little communities, I guess. Um, I mean, the dyspraxic community is already pretty small, but it's pretty spread out with what it is. So there's all these little groups. And I was part of this one little group where we would sit around and talk. We all got along really well. We became friends. And then I had a colleague of mine who I will not, mention his name, but he was on this show. But he had a podcast and he helped me start it. And long story short, there were some issues with things that he and someone else interpreted about things that I posted on Twitter that was completely misrepresented and misinterpreted. But all of a sudden, they started spreading rumors about me, calling me misogynist, sexist. And one person in particular who was not involved in any of the situation, um, she wrote about me in a blog. She wrote about me and other individuals, and she wrote about me and she referred to me by the name of Pond because I'm across the pond. Because the thing is, with the whole dyspraxic community, the vast majority of them are located in the UK. So being from America, I'm sort of like I'm like a big fish in a small pond, or a small fish in a big pond, whatever the analogy is. And so I it's very evident though to a lot of people, considering that, because she said that I was, from America. Pond is from America. So a lot of people knew she was referring to me. And of course, the blog had a lot of misinformation and a lot of things that I was accused of that just was not true. And I read the blog on my podcast just because I thought it was I thought it was so ridiculous that I needed to address it and kind of break things down and give, the real story, the accurate truth. And so because she referred to me as Pond, I was like, just to kind of get at her a little bit, I'm just gonna adopt the name, and I just put it in the name, the Pondcast, as a little play on words. And that's sort of what it became. But it's kind of like to show her and show these people that, look, you can talk about me, but at least be straight, be honest, which they're not. um so just to kind of like, fine, if you're going to be that way and that's how you're going to handle the conflict and disagreements, then I'm just going to adopt your name that you gave to me, that you attributed to me. So
And where
that's where that.
where did these accusations of sexism and misogyny come from? How did they first come about?
So this person who the male, the guy, he helped me start the podcast by giving me sort of like, advice and whatnot. And he again was my first guest, and he was a nice guy, and I liked what I respected him, and he seemed to respect me at first. And the thing was, he suggested, whenever I did the first couple of episodes and interviews and stuff, he suggested to market my podcast to get on Twitter. And I was kind of like, I don't know about that. I've always kind of had like an unhealthy kind of relationship with social media, especially with like Facebook and stuff. I have a habit of kind of just like putting things out there that maybe I regret saying later. And I give I'm a very opinionated person. So like something will come to me and I'll put it out there. But so I was a little bit apprehensive about going on Twitter, but he kind of like insisted, like, it's the best way to connect with people and to market yourself. So and to network. So I got on Twitter and I started again, because Twitter is so toxic. You see all this stuff on there, and I was seeing all this stuff that was kind of like attacking men and kind of saying, oh, men are so shallow. And I saw a few things that were talking about men, not wanting to date like overweight women, or significantly overweight women, and being accused of being shallow in that way. And I kind of like said something along the lines of, it's kind of a double standard that you can say that, you know, you can shame a guy for not wanting to date a girl because of her weight, but it's perfectly okay for women to shame men for their height, you know. And it was just a little bit of a double standard where it's like you can say this about men, but you know, it's perfectly okay for women. And weight being something that for most people is you know, you can change that, you know, it's something, a lot of it, you know, there's always exceptions, but most of the time it's based on lifestyle, excuse me. And you ever just get that moment where you're just like talking and then like your breath gets caught in your throat? That's what happened just now. But with with weight, you can generally do something about it, but with height, it's just your genetics. It's just what it is. And I don't believe in shaming anybody. I'm all about body positivity, but I'm also, you know, I think everybody should be able to have their preferences, and I'm not shaming anybody for having preferences based on height. But it's almost like, you know, where is the line? You know, why is one thing okay and not the other? But anyway, just from that one thing that I said, next thing I knew, I had been blocked by this individual, and I had tried to, you know, I was asking around why, and then I ended up receiving an email from him saying that it was because I had posted things that were misogynistic, and I later learned that those same people were basically, they had blocked me on Twitter, but other people had seen the things that they had said and sent them to me, um, as far as like calling me out and taking a stand against misogyny and stuff like that, and basically painting me as some kind of misogynist because I, you know, said something critical about, you know, double standards involving women, which are perfectly reasonable and perfectly valid. Um, and so it kind of stirred up a bit of controversy and caused this divide between me and members of this group that I held very dear. You know, I mean, we all became good friends and we supported each other. We looked out for each other. Some of them came on before I did the podcast. I did some live streams on Instagram. So it became like this thing where it's like all of a sudden all these people were turning on me, and I'm just like, no, you don't understand. Like I'm not a sexist. I'm not a misogynist. I'm all about women's rights, you know. I'm all about, you know, equality. Everybody should be the same. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's these double standards, and it's like, why can't we talk about them? You know, why can't you say anything without being labeled as some kind of bigot? So it just turned into this ugly thing. And as much as I tried to remedy the situation, uh, even going so far as to, you know, trying to get a mediator to help me, you know, to have me have this discussion with this other guy, and he threatened to sue me, which was kind of laughable. He threatened to sue me for defamation because I talked about it on the podcast, and I made the mistake of using his name. It just kind of came out, and I regretted it, and I offered to edit it out, but they wouldn't work with me on that. And so it just became this thing. And a lot of people, for some, you know, as and this is something that I forgive me, I'm talking so much, you know, and I know you guys want to get to your next question, but there's I lost my train of thought. There's people who there's this sort of thing that's got happened to me a lot in my life where there will be a conflict with somebody. It's usually based on a misunderstanding, um, and I will try to discuss it with them and try to, you know, to communicate and try to find a resolution, reach a compromise, you know, so that we can be on the same page and resolve things so that everything can be okay and we can respect each other again. And what always ends up happening is that the other person just like moves farther and farther away. And my mistake is I keep trying, you know, harder to fix things, and it ends up kind of pushing them even further away unintentionally when I'm trying to, you know, bring them in to discuss it. And it ends up just kind of becoming this thing where I'm painted as the bad guy, and that's what people are doing now. I still see people posting tweets that are in vague, you know, reference to me. I saw somebody who was in the group just the other day on Twitter say something about like, I usually don't pick sides and whatnot. And it's like, but you totally are. Like, you totally are picking sides because you're shutting me out. You're not even listening to my side or other people's side because I'm not the only person that they've done this to. That's the thing. This is something that they have habitually done, blocking people and then talking about them and accusing them of spreading hate and all this other stuff. And so it's just like, geez, you can't win with these kinds of people. And what can you do other than call yourself Pond?
You had on one of your episodes an actual female anti-feminist come on. Um, can you explain how you were able to contact her, how you got her to come on the show, and can you discuss some of the topics? I know one of the most controversial topics of that episode is when she said that the world was better before women can vote. Do you agree with that?
I don't really have an opinion on that particular point. Um, I think I don't know enough about like the history of women's rights, and I'm not really the kind of person to say whether or not it was. I mean, again, I'm an egalitarian. I believe in equal rights for everybody. So I do think that women should have the right to vote. I don't see why not, but some people I guess could make an argument. I can't really say one way or the other as far as that is concerned. Um, and the interview that you're referring to, I had put it up and then I had to take it down for reasons I'd rather not go into right now, but I'm going to re-upload it, a somewhat edited version of it. Um, and I'm going to put it back up. So you're not going to see it now, yet, but it will be re-uploaded at a later date. But one of the things, kind of what's funny, is one of the ironic things, I don't know if it's irony, but it's kind of paradoxical, is following my experience with what happened. And it's not just that. I've had other experiences. They're not the first people to call me a misogynist because of, I've said something reasonable involving, women and men. And usually what I'm saying is basically we're equal, but like women can be just as bad as men in certain ways. Again, you can't make, you make generalizations, does not reflect every single individual. But what ended up happening is after that experience, I looked into sort of the anti-feminism movement, the women, particularly women against feminism, because I wanted to hear perspective of women who have rejected feminism or have problems with feminism, because I want to know more about their experience. And I've learned a lot by being in groups and seeing things that have been posted, and talking personally with women in the women against feminism movement, that have made me realize just how dangerous and toxic third wave feminism has become, and how much of a detriment to society it's become. And it's hard to it's hard to really sum it up because there's just so much that you could say. Um, but there was this woman in one of the groups that I saw, who went by Feminism on Trial, and she herself had a YouTube channel where she makes videos discussing feminism and kind of breaking things down. And I just thought she was very well spoken, and I thought she had a lot of good points and a lot of, I didn't agree with everything she said. But I think it's healthy to disagree with people. I have friends who I don't, we're very good friends, but I don't agree with everything that they say, and vice versa. That's perfectly okay. I think one of the things that makes human interaction beautiful is that we can disagree on certain things, but still talk about them and discuss them and get different perspectives. And I like to hear other people's perspectives. Um, and so I asked her if she would come on, and she graciously agreed. And so she came on, and we had a great long uh, interview. And we didn't touch upon there's so much you could touch upon that we didn't get, as far in, like, I thought it would be cool to do a follow-up kind of interview, but I haven't heard anything since that. But yeah, I just reached out to her, And usually people reach out to me when they're coming on the podcast, but I reached out to her just because I thought she would be a very good guest, and I thought we would have a lot of interesting things to talk about, which we did.
What is your biggest concern with feminism? What is the biggest threat that you view feminism in regards to society and maybe you know to males? What is the biggest threat or the biggest threats that you see this modern wave of feminism causing in society? What are some of the ills?
Well, I think the clear one is gender relations, is how men and women interact with one another, how they view each other, and the harmony between men and women. I think it's disrupted that. And what I think modern feminism has done is it's sort of enabled young women and girls and they grow up to be young women, of course. It's enabled them to kind of be entitled, self-victimizing, um, and narcissistic. There's a lot of I've met many women nowadays who are very narcissistic. What it all and so that's one of the things where it negatively affects women. It's not just men that I'm concerned about. It's women, and they also judge women too. I mean, if you hear the stories of these women against feminism, ladies, um, and I call them ladies because they are respectable, and but they have had their own bad experiences with feminism that are unique to women, like being shamed for maybe wanting to take on a traditional lifestyle. Maybe they're Christian. They feel that they want to be like subservient to their husband, which I don't think necessarily means like a slave, or that you don't have any sovereignty yourself. But of course, being a man, I think I've been negatively impacted by it in the sense that, you know, there's so much shame that is put upon men just for being men. I mean, you see it nowadays in some schools, where there have been schools where they actually have young boys um, apologize to the girls in their class for, rape culture, or for just, I don't know. And it makes women out. I think part of it makes women afraid of men, and I think it makes men afraid of women, because men are always afraid that they're going to be labeled something, they're going to be accused of something. They're afraid. Like for me, I'm just today I was in the park, and I was walking by these two girls, and I didn't interact with them, but even just being by, just walking past them, I was just like, oh, I hope I didn't creep them out. And I think it makes men neurotic, and I think it crushes the confidence and the spirit of men, where they're like ashamed of being men. They feel like they can't be friendly, they can't be themselves, because even if they do nothing, they can still make a woman uncomfortable. And I just think there's so much that you can dig about that, but that's just one of the things, and that's the thing. The main thing is how we interact with each other, how we see each other, the fact that we can't really we there's no harmony like there used to be. Men and women used to get along better, and obviously it's not that we never get along now. I still have female friends and everything. It's just that you always feel like you're walking on eggshells, whether you're a man worried about making a woman uncomfortable and being creepy, or you're a woman worried that that you're going to be harassed. And they're both valid concerns, but I think feminism exaggerates it. And I think it plays up the victimhood of women, and it plays up the vileness and the threat of men, when in reality most women are very strong, independent, and self-reliant, and most men are very respectful and cordial, and they wouldn't hurt somebody, willingly. So yeah, that's sort of my take on that, to put it shortly.
Sure. And moving from that to, I guess, a broader view, I do know that you have labeled yourself in the past politically as a moderate. However, some have noticed that you're sort of slowly leaning more toward the right each day, or at least that's some people's perceptions. Do you believe that that's true, that you are becoming more conservative, or do you think that you've always been a moderate and that you still are very much in the center?
I think I've always sort of been in the center. I think I've really, I know that some people think that I've become more right wing or more conservative, but I feel like I've always kind of, I don't think I've shifted. I think I've been educated more on things that I've kind of always kind of thought, but it's just that because I've obviously my perspective has broadened a bit. I'm learning more things that that kind of I don't know reignite sort of my centrism or my moderatism whatever. um and really what I am as far as politically or socially or whatever is I listen to both sides and I follow my own conclusion, which everyone should do. But it's become such a tribalist thing. It's become a pick a side, and you have to be all the way one way or all the way the other. Excuse me. And for me, it's like I'm more like a pendulum. It depends on the issue, it depends on the subject, and it's like I may swing slightly to the left, I might swing slightly to the right. There are things like like it's interesting the way that you say that because there are things from like the anti-feminist, the women against feminism movement that I disagree, that I'm not on the same side of. Like, I'm like a lot of them tend to be like Christian, a lot of them tend to be pro-life, a lot of them tend to be uh yeah, I don't know, but like traditionalists, that they think people should be a certain way. And my whole thing is people should be free to make their own choices no matter what they are, as long as they don't hurt other people and don't bring harm into the society. And at the same but I'm an atheist and I'm pro-choice, but at the same time there are certain things where it's like I will look at the issue and I might agree somewhat and disagree somewhat on the same issue. There could be something where two people are talking and I look at one of them and go like, I see what you're saying. And then I look at the other and I go, I see what you're saying. And then I also look at the other one and go, I don't know about that. And then, I look at the other and I don't think I don't think I don't think I'm like a minority in having this kind of perspective on politics and societal things. I think most people generally are more or less to the middle, but you're always going to have people who take things to an extreme level. And unfortunately, I feel like the left has taken things to an extreme level that is become too much. It's just become too much of a hassle. It's become too annoying. It's become too much of like, they've become so arrogant and so the word's not coming to me, but they're so sure of themselves, and they basically their tactics are shame anybody that doesn't completely agree with you. And I saw something on Joe Rogan, which yes, sometimes I do listen to Joe Rogan, where he was basically saying you can't be woke enough to these people. You can't be uh, you know inclusive enough. There's always going to be something that somebody says about you, and if you give in to that kind of thing and just try to please them, there's always going to get something on you. So you just have to call out people's bullshit, and you have to be honest with yourself. And I don't think there's anything that should be construed as controversial if people understand my perspective fully. um, but people are always going to twist what you say, um, and they're always going to make you look worse than you actually are. And sadly, a lot of people just kind of take things at face value and they don't try to get your take on it, your side of it. um, so people, I don't know, people are crazy in short. And but I've always been sort of in the middle. I think it's just when you ask me about certain things, you're gonna get a perspective that seems more to the right. But if you ask other kinds of questions, it'll be like you'll get more of a left tilt. It just depends. I dip my feet in both both, pools, I guess.
Okay. So recently, we have actually seen the entering of Caitlyn Jenner into the race for a governor in the state of California. And Matthew McConaughey, I believe, is considering running in Texas for governor. He hasn't decided yet. But my question for you is, looking forward into your future, do you have any plans or any intent to ever run for office? And if so, under which political party?
No, I do not see myself, even though it does seem ridiculous enough that, anybody can go into politics. I mean, we saw that with our last president. And again, with people like maybe Matthew McConaughey and Kate. I don't know enough about Caitlyn Jenner's history other than, she used to be an athlete before the, transition. I don't know if she still is, but I'm really not much of a political person. I think that's part of the reason why I'm such a moderate and why I'm so in the center about everything, because I don't spend all my time looking into political things. I'm a very simple kind of person. And in some ways it feels like the better way to go, because it seems like the more involved you are in politics, the more you feel pressure to just like completely stay on one level, and you become more extreme. And I don't think extremes are ever good. And so, I don't feel any loyalty or any obligation to have certain views. It's just whatever makes sense to me. But for one thing, I don't have enough of a following, to get voters if I were to do something like that. On the other hand, I'm not interested in any kind of political office. I'm not much of a leader. I mean, other than directing or hosting this podcast or something. But that's pretty much the answer to that question. Is no, I don't think I would ever run for politics. But I don't know, maybe in 30 years, maybe I'll be a totally different person.
It could all begin with this autobiography. You never know.
Well, that anyone
everything.
can do it, it seems.
Yeah. It does seem that money is kind of a prerequisite, though, no doubt. Unfortunately, that's how the system is.
Doesn't help me.
Me neither. But my next question for you is kind of a little bit different. It's a very personal question, and I'm very curious to see how you'll answer this. But
Okay.
what would you say is your number one greatest fear in life?
Probably ending up completely alone, and just fading into nothingness, fading into obscurity, not having accomplished anything in life, which sometimes, to be, full disclosure, like there are times where that fear seems like a very like realistic fear, it almost seems like a strong potential reality. That's another reason sort of why I was writing the book is, if nothing else, I could at least have that, and that'll be like a document kind of, that'll be like, that was my life. And then after, whatever happens after, to the end, at least that there was that, whether it becomes a success, whether people read it, it sells anything, but I think it's just kind of like having been a total failure and never having done anything noteworthy. I think that that would probably be the biggest fear.
And if you could describe yourself only using 5 words, what would those words be?
Well, 2 of them would be theatric dyspraxic. Third one would be dramatic. No, creative. So yeah, creative, awkward, See if I could sum it up in one word. Stubborn. I never sort of stop what I'm doing, no matter how fruitless it may seem. Um, Eccentric. Oh wait, I already did five. Was yeah. So whatever. What out of those? That's six. But you can rest assured that I'm going to go a bit overboard. So
Now, speaking of personal questions, I've got one for you. We've noticed on, I think it was Twitter or maybe another social media platform, you're always commenting on your hair. What is your struggle with your hair? I personally don't see anything wrong with it. I know you're displeased with it. What is the issue? Um, what is the battle going on inside your head in regards to your hair?
that's an interesting question. So I hair was not really something that I gave much credence to when I was younger, and then when I was about 21, my hair started thinning pretty. I've always had thin hair, and I've always had a cowlick, so I never really liked the way my hair looked. But it worked when I was like a kid and a teenager because I had this very distinctive part. It was like a part in the middle, and it almost looked like a horseshoe, not like a horseshoe, like a bald man's horseshoe, but like the front, as far as like the bangs was almost like shaped like a horseshoe, where there was like a little like arch sort of in the middle, and I always kind of like liked it. It was kind of distinct, and but my hair has always been thin, fine, very fine hair, and always a struggle. But when I was about 19, I guess was when it started. It started thinning a bit, and by the time I was 21, I was I had my hair slicked back, and you could see like my scalp was almost transparent basically, and very white. And I remember my sister. So my grandmother had passed away when we were about 21, and we were in the motel room getting ready for the funeral, and I had just gotten out of the shower, which of course my hair was wet, so of course it was going to look thinner. And I slicked my hair back, and I was combing it, and my sister just said, "You're going bald." And I looked in the mirror and I saw that, you could see through my hair basically. And I was like really worried about it. And it became an obsession of mine, as it is for a lot of guys when they realize that their hair is thinning. And I realized that it had become a problem. I tried doing all these different things to help with my hair because nobody wants to be bald, especially in this day and age. Baldness has become so stigmatized, And again, I apologize to anybody who's who is bald, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I don't judge men for losing their hair because there's no reason to judge anyone. But it does. A lot of people could say that it reduces your attractiveness, but the biggest worry for me, less than the whole attractiveness thing, is how would it affect my getting roles in plays and in acting, because I've always kind of prided myself on being sort of a chameleon when it comes to acting and being able to act, play different kinds of characters. And you could say, why don't you just do a wig? But a wig, most community theaters don't really have access to like really realistic looking wigs, and they tend to be more, out of my price range. So it's just like, and plus with your hair, you can do different things with it. A wig kind of has to be the same kind of thing. So that was sort of my main concern. But I'm 27 now, and I have not lost my hair. I've done different things to try and help it, you know, like I was on, still sometimes use minoxidil, which I'm not ashamed to admit to taking stuff and using stuff to thicken my hair and to prevent the hair fall. But yeah, I was using finasteride, which I'd like to get back on. If I could afford it, I would get a transplant. I have no problem admitting that, just because, and I personally believe that whatever you choose to do with your hair, if you're losing it, whether it's to shave it, just let it go and just have the horseshoe look on the sides and the back, if you choose to get a hairpiece or a system, or if you decide to combat the hair loss. And guys get really, there are guys who get really good results with a hair transplant. And sometimes, if you find the right clinic for, a decent price, still more than I can afford at the moment, but, it gives you hope. But for the time being, my hair looks okay. I was just thinking the other day that for somebody who has technically been balding for like 8 years, I'm doing pretty good, for myself. So I don't know what it'll be like in the future. But for now, it's not where I would like it to be. I still wish I could have it parted down the middle or slick it back and it looked good. But it never really did look good. My father's always had like real thick hair, and I didn't get those genes from him, sadly. And but it fluctuates. It's really weird. But hopefully I'll be able to keep it for the time being, for as long as I can.
Can you walk us through some of the relationships that you've had in the past with the females?
Oh boy. What is there to say? I mean, there's been I haven't dated so I shouldn't leave it at that. I have, but it's been different for me than I guess most people. Part of it is sort of my experiences being male, and part of it is just and whenever you read my book, if anybody listening to this reads it, which I hope you do, because I think it's interesting. I think it should be interesting not just for people who are dyspraxic. I try to make it appealing to a wide variety of people. Um, but whenever you look into it, you kind of see why maybe I wasn't the best when it came to pursuing women and pursuing girls, which I regret that. Like being in school, I had no confidence, no self esteem. I was just convinced that no girl would ever want me. And the ones who did, I thought were crazy, like why would you? And I mean, to be honest, I don't mean to sound shallow, but sometimes, some of the ones that did kind of like me, foolishly, they were not really the kind that I was attracted to or that I really could be interested in that way. Um, so that was always a factor. But the main thing, of course, was just there was always something holding me back. And as I have met people, of course, I did the whole online thing and having sort of like, oh, I fell in love with this girl online, which getting older now, I realize, of course, that's almost never works out, and it's never legitimate, it's never genuine. Um, and I go into it a bit in the book, but there have been sort of situations that are complicated and that kind of maybe had a potentiality for a relationship, but there was always some factor. There's always something wrong. Even if, an amazing girl likes you, there's always a catch. Like for instance, there was one girl that I knew who ended up having a boyfriend, and you know, we had a mutual friend who set us up, and when I realized that she had a boyfriend, I tried to break it off, but I was pushed to keep pursuing it, and it just kind of like after a while, I realized that I was being used basically for infidelity, and I was not, of course, I was not okay with that, and so I broke things off. Um, the last, I haven't dated in a few years. The last girlfriend I had, I met online, and looking back on it, I feel like I was probably settling a little bit. Not that she was, that bad, but I think I was trying to convince myself more and more that I liked her. I did like her, but it wasn't like the same. It wasn't like it was like more forced. And so I don't do that anymore. And now, maybe someday I'll get back into it, but I don't really see myself dating anytime soon, even though it would be great to have that kind of companionship. Um, and I mean, I like the ladies, but I still struggle with my self-esteem, and unfortunately, well, maybe not unfortunately, I mean, it makes sense and it's probably sensible, but girls, tend to go for guys who have a little bit more confidence in themselves. And I'm just not in a position at the moment to really put myself out there. But I'm always open to whatever, comes my way. I'm always open to meeting new people, and I like people. I like to make new friends, and who knows, maybe, a connection can form from there.
On balance, do you think that dating apps have been good for society or more negative for society? Because I tend to be more on the on the negative side of things, because I think that they've made people more shy and unable to approach girls in public. What's your opinion on that?
When it comes to things like Tinder, that's I feel like that encourages sort of people to be shallow. Um, so, if you can just swipe right, it's just like I feel like it encourages people to be pickier and just kind of like see people from one side rather than getting to know people. I just think social media in general has negatively affected how we communicate and how we socialize, where we don't feel like we need to socialize. A lot of people, it seems, with people in the real world anymore, and it's becomes hard. And people, again, like you said, I think it enables like social anxiety, and it doesn't encourage people to actually make real world connections when you can just text somebody. As far as dating sites go, I think there's good things and bad things. There's positives and negatives, and one of the positives is it makes it easier to meet people. You know, where as opposed to like going somewhere and doing like a meet and greet thing, which does you don't see as often in like more rural areas, I guess. So it's easier to like be aware of what kind of people are out there, and uh, you it may increase your chances of finding a match if maybe you're more isolated than some. But again, the negatives kind of almost outweighs that, and I think it just makes it easier. So yeah.
When you are attracted to a girl, what is the first thing that you notice about her? Is it her face, personality? What stands out to you the most initially?
When I first meet her or when I first see her?
Uh, when you first see her, or yeah, let's start with see her. Yeah.
Well, of course, you can't, right away. I mean, I guess you can see some of their personality in terms of the way they carry themselves. Um, yeah, I guess when I think on those terms, I guess it is sort of how they carry themselves, what like I mean, their face probably, and sort of their body language. Do they come across as like warm and opening, or warm and open, or do they come across as closed off and frigid? Um, or and what do their eyes say? But the physical feature, is always it's always the eyes. I'm a sucker for eyes. For some reason I always like brown eyes, like big, like almond eyes. But blue eyes, green eyes, whatever, beautiful eyes always captivate me, and a smile is always, says a thousand words, I guess. um so those, the smile, the eyes, and just their general atmosphere, the vibes that come off, what kind of person they seem, you know, their air, their aura, I guess.
Now, Theatric, what are some of your interests? What do you do on a daily basis with your free time?
Probably not the best idea for me to go through everything that I do, because it'll make me sound like someone who's not really up to much. At the moment, I'm looking at some job prospects. So the pandemic kind of screwed things over a lot with me, as far as my employment situation and my living situation. So for the past several months, I've been living with my parents, which is not unusual for people in this day and age, by the way. um, and I've been trying to find some job prospects, and there are some that seem lucrative. So I maybe that'll my situation will change in the near future. But as far as what I do throughout the day, like I mentioned, I work on my book a lot, and it in some ways it is a very slow process, just because I'm trying to capture as much of the e- emotion and the perspective that I have on certain events in my life. I I feel like it will make a lot more sense when people read it, why I chose to write it and why I spent so much time on it. Um, it may be like a masterwork for me. Hopefully not, I would hope that I would move on to something better, something bigger. But you never know with these types of things. But I listen to music a lot. I watch TV, a frequent amount, and usually every day around 6 p.m. to like 8 or 9, even sometimes to till about sundown. I'll take a really long walk. I like going to this place called Dogwood Trails, which is a great place to hike and take long walks. Sometimes I go running. Sometimes I just walk downtown. I'll walk by the old theater that I used to do plays at, which hopefully, one day I'll be able to do plays at again. But I I don't really like being a homebody, but that is kind of how I am right now, just because there's not that much else. But I listen to music a lot, watch TV, and take long walks, and do the podcast, obviously, talk to people. I write songs as well. Um, so I write lyrics more specifically, and so I'll write something and I'll send it to one of my two. Right now, it's two people that I write lyrics with, and sometimes they'll put music to it, and they'll sound pretty good. They make me sound like a real artist. um, and that's pretty much it. I'm a very restless kind of person, so I like being active. But sometimes there's not always something to do.
What are some of your influences when it comes to the arts?
I don't really think too much on who influences me. Obviously, there are people that have had a great impact on what I feel like it means to be an actor. But obviously, I don't, I like to avoid being derivative of people. What's interesting to me is, and I know you asked, you didn't ask specifically about acting, um, but I always admire people who do sort of the triple threat type thing, or they do multiple. They're almost like auteurs, you know, like Charlie Chaplin or Woody Allen, or even though he's not considered like as much of a legend. Maybe he will someday. I don't know, but like Trey Parker, he's the creator of South Park. He writes all the episodes, directs, does a lot of the voices. Same with like Mike Judge, those types of people. I was always interested in animation, so like Danny Antonucci, Jendi Tartakovsky, um, John R. Dilworth, and again, Trey Parker, Mike Judge, and maybe Matt Groening in some ways, and of course there's always the greats like Daniel Day-Lewis, and for some I'm drawing a blank as far as other people. Another big thing for me, another big influence to me was Groucho Marx and the Marx Brothers. I absolutely love the Marx Brothers, their comedy, and Groucho to me kind of shaped in a way sort of my how animated I am how my facial expressions and doing, even though he was largely known for his wit and for his dialogue, it so much his physical characterization I think is kind of a little bit underrated. And so those were some of the influences, I guess you could say. But I'm influenced by just about every every talent, and I'm always like motivated to do something artistic, even though sometimes it's hard to get yourself to do it, and sometimes, it's hard to make it how you want it to be.
You've been inspired then by many of the great actors and musicians of the past. You seem to gravitate more toward the quality as opposed to just what's popular today. And this is true as well in your lyric writing. What is your reasoning for that, and why does it seem that you do prefer quality over popularity?
I don't think that I can be any other way. I don't think it's necessarily a deliberate. I firmly believe that well, again, being true to yourself, being honest with yourself. I think if any moral that comes from anything that I say, which again sounds very simplified, doesn't sound any too profound, but just being yourself, just being true to yourself and doing what you want to do, how you want to do it. I've always I've always written for myself. I've always performed for myself, obviously for others, but I do believe that, you know, the kind of audience that you should play for is the kind of audience that's like you, in the sense that who you are, what you like, uh, if it resonates to you, it would resonate to other people. Um, and sometimes if you're just trying to do what's popular and doing like the in thing, you get nowhere because you're restricting your own artistic sense and integrity. And a lot of times the people that just follow a trend don't end up becoming as successful as the ones who start the trend. And it's not so much that I feel like I'm a trendsetter, because I think that a lot of the things that I write about or do maybe won't always resonate with everybody, you know? Um, but it seems like every time I try to do something that's mainstream and super popular, or would have like a mass appeal, it always seems to be like not what people are looking for, or there's always something that they feel like is missing. And it's just like, well, all I can do is just put my voice in it. And I know that there's potential in what I do, and I doubt my work a lot. Um, but I do it in the hopes that I can get better at it. And but I everyone that I admire, from writers to musicians, they were always the same way. They were just, I'm gonna do it my way, and I'm open to collaboration, but at the end of the day, I can only be me and only do it the way that I would do it. And I'll compromise, but you know, you lose your own voice if you're trying too hard to please people, I feel like. So that's really, just comes natural to me.
A lot of people in the entertainment industry and artists, they use drugs in order to influence or maybe bring about inspiration. Can you talk a little bit about any drug use that you've done, if you've done any at all?
um, I don't experiment too much with drugs, but I have experimented, but n- like it's sort of become destigmatized to engage in sort of recreational drug use. Um, we're a bit more like open to that sort of thing, and it's usually not as much of a problem. Um, in a way, it's almost like you're stigmatized if you avoid drugs, in a way. Like, um, I don't avoid drugs. I don't really care to to get too into it. Plus, I have issues with dissociation, and that is enhanced often by drug use, even just something as simple as marijuana. You know, um, something that puts you in a totally different mindset can be scary. It can be haunting, and just makes things difficult. So it's just like I have, I've done, I've smoked weed. I've uh I've tripped on psychedelic substances, LSD, mushrooms, and other stuff too. And each one has been sort of an interesting experience in itself, which would be, too long to go into. But and it's not that I'm open to doing it again, but I'm not rushing to jump into it. It's not something I care to do on a frequent basis. Um, and I've learned a lot about, like, set and setting, being in the right mindset, being in the right place with the right people. I've made some mistakes. Luckily, they weren't like too big mistakes, but I feel like I feel like some I feel like it's kind of a detriment to you, though, if you if you become reliant on drugs to just to deal with reality. I think that it's better to try and learn how to deal with reality sober. But it's I understand drug addiction. I understand it's difficult. I'm not judging anybody or simplifying what people go through, of course. Um, but I try to do things in moderation when I do it at all.
Would you ever date a fan of yours?
If I ever got a fan, um, you know, it it just uh it just depends on what kind of person someone is. I mean, obviously, I've never been in a position where I had a large following, where I had like dedicated fans. I think it would be, other than maybe like some friends or something, which is, valuable. Don't get me wrong. Um, but I haven't had that kind of notoriety or recognition. But if I did, and there was somebody who maybe after my book is written or whatever, and people read it, maybe they'll become fans or something. Um, and if I met them and they turned out to be really cool people, and I thought they were attractive, then yeah, I would definitely be open to it if we were compatible. It doesn't make a difference whether somebody's a fan or not. At least with a fan, they at least know you on some level.
Would you say that you were more ruled by your emotions or by logic?
Um, for me, they're almost like in tandem with one another. Um, what I feel is logical is usually on this, based on what I feel is logical, or what I feel, what I feel is emotional is usually based on what I feel is logical, I should say. But I think generally my perspective is driven by what I feel is rational and reasonable. But I am like, just like anybody, I have feelings that can be fragile at times, and I have developed a bit of a thick skin, but like there's nothing that when it comes to criticisms, um, so when people criticize me, it's like there's not anything anybody can say that I haven't heard before, that I don't tell myself, on a regular basis. But when it comes like what usually happens, of course, is friends of mine, if they're upset over something, or if they're, I'm my emotions are mainly ruled by whether or not something is true or not. If somebody misrepresents my behavior or things I say, then it can make it difficult. I don't think I answered that question properly, because like my mind kind of became disjointed there. But sometimes your behavior is fueled by your emotions, but most of the time, if I can remain poised, and usually like an emotional response to something for me is usually based on whether or not it's someone else is behaving in a logical manner or a rational manner. If somebody's being irrational or illogical, then I usually tend to be like, angry or like frustrated. Or if it's like the cause of a feud or something, it'll give me anxiety and things like that. So I don't know if that answered your question properly, but
It does. So this will actually be my final question, and then we will hand it back to Joan for his final question. So looking forward into the future for you, being the Theatric Dyspraxic with this autobiography coming out and your podcast and everything you have going for yourself, in 50 years from now, what would you like your legacy to be?
well, I don't think too much in terms of overall legacy, like, the end of your life type thing. Um, because I don't know what's going to happen in the next 50 years. I don't know where I'll be. I don't know what I will have accomplished, if anything, by then. I would hope, because I'm always doing stuff. I'm always writing. I'm always trying to find a way to act. I'm gonna keep doing this podcast and hopefully get back into doing my YouTube channel when it becomes when I'm able to do that in a comfortable way, in a comfortable setting. Living with my parents and stuff, it's hard for me to do some of the stuff, to make the kind of content that I was making and enjoyed making before. But the problem that I had when I was younger, being a kid, is that I thought too far ahead, and I thought too much about being an adult, what I was going to do when I was an adult. And then when I got to be an adult, I had to face so many disappointments and so many kind of like expectations that just didn't go anywhere, that I kind of just take things day by day. And I'll only hope that when this book is finally finished, people will give it a chance, give it a read, hopefully enjoy it, and maybe I could influence people in some manner, whatever it is, um, more than I am now.
Thank you, Brandon. I've got one more question before we wrap this interview up. What is dyspraxia?
Get to the meat of it right at the end. Um, so one of the things that I do is try to spread awareness, which sometimes it feels like I'm not doing a very good job of it. Um, because some people, they do so many things. They write blogs about, oh, this is what it's like to drive when you're dyspraxic. It's like, well, I don't drive. This is what it's like. My book kind of handles all that, because there's so many things that for me, it's like you kind of have to know. Like, I can't just go into these kinds of specific things without talking about other things, and it's kind of like it's all within the crux of sort of my story and the chronology of it. Um, but to put it simply, and it's a very complicated kind of condition, but it's a neurological disorder that affects the planning of movement, which means everything that we do, everything that we say, it's all a result of your brain sending signals to parts of your body or parts of your brain, when it comes to like thought regulation and memory. But it affects things like coordination, so like your fine motor skills, your gross motor skills. It affects your balance. And so there are a number of things that people struggle with when they have it, that may be very easy and natural to most people, to neurotypicals. Things like tying your shoelaces, handwriting, um, throwing a ball, you know, walking straight. And or things like with speech, pronouncing certain words. You might blank a lot. You might use a lot of filler words. Your train of thought could be very erratic, so you don't always follow the same train of thought and say everything that you mean to say. You don't always explain things in the best way, which I feel like is definitely true for me. Um, and it affects memory. The strange thing about people with dyspraxia is they tend to have very good long-term memory, but really poor short-term memory. So like for me, I remember like events, I remember things happening that maybe other people don't remember. I can picture like as a certain, just a random moment, like, eighth grade, drama class. And I'll remember specific surroundings. But if I was to remember like details of a specific thing somebody said, if I run into a problem in like a sequence of things, I'll uh I'll forget. I'll struggle to remember certain specifics. One of the things that dyspraxics often have issue with are patterns, um, equations, like sequences of things. So math, music theory, instructions are often very difficult, and they're difficult for me. Executive function is something that is often affected. It's hard, especially after a while, because when you get older, you screw up at so many things, you lose confidence that you can't bring yourself to do things that, maybe you should. It's hard to start something when you are worried that you're going to mess it up, or you're going to mess it up, which makes it very difficult, in school, and then as an adult makes it very difficult with your job. So I and several others, some of whom, maybe I'm not on the best terms with, but we we have virtually the same goal, which is to show people what we're dealing with, and spread, awareness so that people can understand when somebody is struggling with the kind of things that we struggle with, because the fact that so many people don't know about it is the hardest thing about it, because we have all these little things that we're dealing with, and we're not getting any kind of accommodations for it, and we're always left to have, people are always left in befuddlement. They're always confused at we're why we can't seem to do anything right, why we're struggling with things that to most people are easy. And even when we try to explain to them, because they're just so uneducated about it, and a lot of them are just disinterested in learning about it, even when it's affecting one of their employees or one of their students or something. And, a lot of us have been bullied. A lot of us have dealt with, mental illness, depression. I mean, I've talked to several people who are dyspraxic, and I'm always interested in talking to more. And a lot of us, most of us have the same, I mean, we're all different. We've all had different experiences, but there are certain similarities and certain things we have in common that just are interesting. Like the fact that so many of us have had a teacher who's called us stupid in public, and the fact that so many of us have dealt with people just not understanding what we're going through. And it feels like an uphill battle at times, but we just try our best to just put ourselves out there. And there's been several books written about dyspraxia, and I don't want mine to feel like just another one, because there's a lot of great books you can read if you're trying to learn about it and understand it a little bit better. And there's a lot of information about it in my book, but what I really wanted to tackle is how it affects you on a deeply personal level, and how somebody who maybe has big dreams, has a lot of creativity, how they're affected by it, and how it can affect them, their development and their progression from childhood to adulthood, warts and all, and full disclosure, just, you know, the demons, the dark stuff, I mean, there's a chapter in my book that opens with a suicide attempt, you know. So that's the kind of stuff that you see. So, but you also learn about dyspraxia, but it also goes into the confusion of going through your life not knowing what was going on with you. So with all that, I hope that people can learn more about it. And if you are dyspraxic and you want to come on my show and be interviewed and tell your story, you know, we will, you know, we can definitely arrange that.
Well, thank you for sharing your stories with us, Brandon. Thank you
you
for
very
letting
much.
us interviewing you. And Mr. Gall, I appreciate you taking the time to join us in this interview as well.
It's been an honor, and I think we've both learned a lot about dyspraxia and about the Theatric Dyspraxic, and I hope that more people can learn about him, subscribe to his YouTube channel, and get on board and follow him.
Yes, I strongly urge people to subscribe and to comment, leave comments, and
like the post, like the video.
like and share. Absolutely. Theatric Dyspraxic, do you have any final thoughts or comments before we wrap this interview up?
Well, I just have to say that it's been a pleasure. Even though I feel like some of the things that I say are a bit like long-winded, and they jump, you know, from topic to topic, and they're hardly like, you know, straight and coherent. But I hope that I answered your questions satisfactorily, and that people maybe had a little bit more of an insight. It's been an interesting hour and a half, just because I'm not used to being the one interviewed rather than the one interviewing. So it's interesting being on this side of it too. And I just hope that, you know, eventually, I don't know when, I'm shooting for possibly next year, to complete my book. But I've made so many strides with it. I've worked tirelessly on it, that I hope that when it is eventually available for release, however it is, I haven't worked that out yet. I hope that people give it a chance and don't write it off as just some narcissistic drivel, you know. I hope that people can read it and possibly learn a little bit more about me. And I'm always happy to talk to people and have people on the show, whether they're dyspraxic or if they just have something to talk about and they want to discuss it with me. I'm happy to do that, just because I enjoy talking to people and I enjoy doing these types of recordings. Also, if you want to have me read stuff aloud on the podcast, if you want me to read, like do like public readings of things you've written, if you've written an article, you know, or a short story or poetry, anything like that, I love doing that kind of stuff. And but the last thing I'm just gonna say is thank you guys for interviewing me and for putting this all together. I think it's been fun.